Hello and welcome to On Purpose Astrology. I'm Mandy Lockley. Today I'm going to be giving you a look at the astrology of a very, very prominent and very much at the moment in the news rock band. Let me share my presentation and then you'll probably know exactly who I'm talking about. The Gallagher Brothers, the band Oasis. They might need no introduction to you, but just in case you're not quite aware of who they are, Oasis are a four-piece band, but the heart of the band is two brothers, Noel Gallagher and Liam Gallagher. They came to prominence. They were very successful in the 1990s, part of Britpop. And their songs, their anthems really mean a lot to a lot of people. They became almost as famous for their feuding, the two brothers feuding and falling out and breaking up the band and getting back together and breaking up. So I'm going to look at the astrology of their relationship and their feuding, looking at a minor aspect called the Sesquiquadrate. It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Sesquiquadrate, also known as the Sesquare. I'll tell you exactly what that is. It's worth looking at if you see it in a chart, in your own chart. They are minor aspects. They have narrow orbs. They can have a massive impact, as you will see as we go through the charts and the synastry, the chart connections between the two brothers. Now, this is part of a presentation that I gave at a conference a couple of years ago, but I thought I'd share it with you now because it's newsworthy, because the brothers, the Gallagher brothers and the rest of the band have got back together and they're doing a world tour. It's a massive success. Their songs mean so much to so many people. And there's been a bit of Oasis mania, you know, and they are back together, obviously. And for the moment, they're friends, and let's hope it stays that way. So let's have a look. Let's start by having a look at what the Sesquiquadrate aspect is, or the sesquare, you might call it. I might actually call it the sesqui for the rest of this presentation because it's just easier to say, because Sesquiquadrate is a little bit of a tongue twister. What is it and what is it all about? Well, here we go. Let's have a look. Scroll down. So the sesqui square, the sesqui. So it's between planets and points that are 135 degrees apart in a chart, give or take a couple of degrees either side. So they're not easy to spot like squares, and oppositions are very easy to spot. It's known as a minor aspect, but as I said, it can have a massive impact, and we'll show that throughout this presentation. But what does it mean? So there's a couple of astrologers that have written about Sesquiquadrates. There's a book called Dynamics of Aspect Analysis by Bill Turney and Aspects in Astrology by Sue Tompkins. And the budding astrologer or astrologer student, I definitely recommend both of those books. So let's see what these two fantastic astrologers have said about the Sesquiquadrate in their books. Well, Sue Tompkins said they are weaker than squares, but show up intensely in a more narrow way, especially if they're strongly connected to squares and or oppositions. So they show up intensely in a more narrow way than squares. Squares tend to, almost particularly T-squares, which is squares and oppositions combined, tend to almost write the story of our life, but they will show up in very narrow ways. And in this example, they show up in the sibling relationship. As I've already said, they're difficult to see in the chart, 135 degrees. You can, go around and do the sums, go the 360 degrees and count all the degrees, but they're better to find if you've got astrology software or you've got a chart. You can download free charts, as I always say, from astro.com and other places. They are difficult to see. And as Sue Tompkins says about them, they are the manifestation, they manifest unconscious processes. So there's a lack of control that's implied there. Again, we'll see this in this example. Bill Turney goes on to say in his book, the chapter on the Sesquiquadrate, the sesqui, that they show up as the consequences of a lack of composure and self-restraint in interpersonal matters. The consequences of a lack of composure and self-restraint in interpersonal matters. He also goes on to say it's where things get blown out of proportion. It's where anger and resentments blow up. It's quite dramatic behaviour, childish egoism, especially when someone doesn't get their own way, obnoxiousness, exaggerated reactions, manipulation and power plays, unyielding attitudes, and the explosive release of emotional tension. Things getting blown out of proportion, anger and resentments and drama and egoism when you don't get your own way, obnoxious and exaggerated reactions, power plays, and attitudes that you don't want to get rid of, you don't want to release, and they can be explosive, as we've already said. What do they call for? There's always a way to work with our aspects. When we become aware of an aspect, when we become aware of these behavior patterns in this life and in life and where they show up, then we can start to work with them. So what does Bill Turney say is a good way to start to work with them? Well, first is they call for calmness, patience, and objectivity. They also call for a greater recognition and the respect for the needs of others, the rights and feelings and needs of others. They also require self-reflection and also being able to grow into the ability to tolerate and genuinely accept people as they are. So you can look for these in your chart and you can look for them in the charts of others. This is probably an extreme example and it's in the public eye. So everything that I'm going to share with you is in the public eye because the Gallagher brothers, their fallouts were very, very public. They were calling each other names on social media and that kind of thing. So let's have a look at the chart. So first of all, we have the chart of Liam Gallagher here. Liam Gallagher. Now we have a correct, sort of, we think correct, it's a rather rating A, which means that it's from either news or from memory rather than a birth chart. Unfortunately, in England, birth times aren't written on birth certificates. But we have a birth time for him, so we can look at the angles. So what does it say? What does it say? What does Liam Gallagher, he's the younger brother, he's the singer. They both sing, they both songwrite, but he's the lead singer in Oasis, and he's the younger brother. Well, we have a very mercurial chart. You can see there circled at the top of the chart, you can see the Sun and Mercury and Mars in a triple conjunction, including Pluto, which has just gone into Libra in his chart, at the top of the chart, a prominent place in the chart on the MC. Mercury, of course, is about siblings, isn't it? Then, you know, because it's on the MC, it's about the public face, the public image, the fame and the status. Very mercurial person, very much associated with his sibling, Mercury there, really intense at the very end of Virgo. His career, his vocation is intricately wound up with his sibling. And you can see, even with Mercury Pluto here, Sun, Mercury, Mars, Pluto here, you can see the power dynamics, the power play there that might be coming out, that did come out. This is square, this is square, this conjunction, this quadruple conjunction, this stellium as we might call it, in Virgo and Libra, it's square Saturn in Gemini. So again, we see the sibling mercurial theme running through in Saturn. Saturn in Gemini in the seventh. The seventh house is about relationships, as we know. It's also about public enemies. People we know, open enemies. It's about the public image as well. So there's a lot about the public image. His public image is intricately ensconced in his relationship and his career with his brother Noel. Mercury and Gemini, as I said, rule siblings. He's become notorious, Liam, for his volatile public outbursts of vocal as well, outbursts of anger, mostly aimed at his brother Noel. It's a sibling relationship marked by creative differences and ego clashes. They both, after they split up for the final time, before they just got back together this last year or so, they formed different separate bands. They were in separate bands and did quite well, but they've always done better together. But there's ego clashes there, creative differences. Here's a quote from Liam about their relationship when they were younger. One night, I come in pissed, as in drunk, and I couldn't find the light switch, so I pissed all over Noel's new stereo. I think their rivalry, their tension, I think it basically boils down to that. We've got Moon in the third house. Again, we've got that kind of, the third house is ruled by Mercury. It's also has something to do with siblings. He's got siblings written all over his chart here. And that's square Neptune, which is rising. Neptune is on the ascendant, right? Moon in Pisces, it's very sensitive, very reactive, can be, in the third house. Associated Pisces with music, and Neptune is associated with music, and Neptune is prominent in his chart. Water sign, Pisces, of course. And he so-called pissed, or urinated, we could say, over his brother's musical equipment. As I said, that Moon in Pisces brings a lot of sensitivity there, and it's square that Neptune rising. So what we see here is someone who is charismatic, goes out into the world, Neptune rising, with charisma, imaginative, creative, and idealistic. It's romantic as well. There's something romantic about that Neptune Moon connection, that square, especially with the Moon also in Pisces, which is ruled in the modern astrology by Neptune, of course. So there's a sense of feeling like the victim. There is a history of codependency, drink, drugs, and all the rock and roll lifestyle cliches as well. Then we have Venus in Leo there. You can see Venus in Leo there in the 8th house. That's in a Sesquiquadrate aspect. So this is the first Sesquiquadrate aspect, prominent one in Liam's chart. You can see going down the dotted line to Jupiter there, right at the very end, very intense. Jupiter strong in its own sign of Sagittarius and very intense at the anaretic degree, the 29 degrees. This is the prominent, and we shall see how this fits with the transits and with Noel's chart. So, as I say, that Venus in Leo, the Venus with an ego, is Sesquiquadrate Jupiter. And Uranus is sextile Jupiter, with Jupiter square that Virgo stellium, that Virgo Libra stellium that we've just talked about, Libra being obviously the Pluto there. So you can see the combinations, how all these prominent things in your chart all are combining. So we can see with this Venus in Leo, with a strong Jupiter, an intense Jupiter, and an association as well with Uranus, we can see that famous swagger, that famous arrogance that he puts on stage, which is attractive to some, very attractive to some, but also off-putting perhaps to others. It also speaks of excess and overindulgence and perhaps a lack of control. We see that childish egoism that we talked about, that we mentioned, is one of those traits of the Sesquiquadrate aspects. Remember, it suggests, the Sesquiquadrate, that there might be explosive releases of emotional tension if the unconscious stuff isn't brought to the surface and worked with, lack of composure. Liam said in 2016, lots of people say, I need to chill out about Noel, his brother. Not until they stop Twitter, because he was saying nasty things about his brother on Twitter. That bleep will always get it from me. So there's that excess, I'm not going to stop. It's interesting as well, a couple of years ago when I did this presentation, this is part of a presentation that I did, a longer presentation for a conference. I looked up Liam's Twitter account, or X as it's called now, and he talks about himself, and you can see the Jupiter here, you can see the moon in Sagittarius, the Jupiter in Sagittarius, the moon in Pisces, we can see the Venus in Leo, we can see his chart. He describes himself as godlike, icon, legend, biblical, omnipresent, prophet, spiritual, majestic, celestial, optimistic, Buddhist Jedi, approachable, Zen lover, and humble. Very moon Pisces square Neptune rising, as I said, as well, and Venus in Leo. So that's a quick sort of glance through Liam's chart. Now let's look at Noel's chart. Now we don't have a birth time for Noel, so we are not looking at the houses for him. Although he might have moon square Neptune. Possible, very possible he has moon square Neptune. As we've seen, moon square Neptune is in Liam's chart. And very often with close family relationships, you will see repetition of aspects. So he may have moon square Neptune. But his moon is in the less emotional Aquarius. Liam's in very emotional moon in Pisces, where there's more rationality in the moon in Aquarius, although moon in Aquarius can sometimes bring with it a lack of awareness of one's emotions, or lack of not feeling the emotions, because everyone feels emotions, everyone has emotions. So if you have moon in Aquarius, never let anyone say that you're not emotional. It's just that often they are analyzed mentally. That's how moon in Aquarius tends to work through their emotions until they learn to sort of feel them more strongly. And the way he talks about, the way Noel has spoken about his brother online and publicly, is a lot more reflective and less reactive. So here's a nice story about their mutual moon Neptunes. As kids, Noel says he used to mess with Liam, mess about with him, you know, tease him, because Liam was afraid of ghosts. He used to move furniture around and then scare Liam by telling him that spirits did it. However, like Liam, his chart also points to a war of worlds. It's another mercurial chart with the Sun and Mercury in Gemini. As I say, we're not looking at the houses. Mercury and the Sun in Gemini appear here on this chart, on the 10th chart. I've just set the chart for midday, halfway through the day. Like his brother, he also has a Mars-Saturn hard aspect, but his is an opposition. He's the older brother, less reactive. So perhaps he takes the Saturn role, the leadership role. It's Saturn in Aries. Perhaps he takes the leadership role in this sibling relationships, you know, being the older sibling. That opposition, that Mars-Saturn opposition, is also supported by trines, those blue aspects there, nice trines, easy, more flowing trines from the moon, potentially, we think probably, yes, for the moon, but potentially, because I say we don't have birth time and moon moves the most quickly in the chart. And the sun, the trine there, you've got that Mars opposite Saturn, you know, which can be about, and Mars is in Libra, and Mars in Libra wants to be more conciliatory. It's not so aggressive. And Saturn as well, perhaps sort of helps him to maybe control his anger. And then you've got these nice trines from the sun and from the moon there. So more able to control his feelings and also to see the bigger perspective. He too has a prominent Sesquiquadrate aspect in his chart, and we can see this. We can see he's got Uranus conjunct Pluto in a Sesquiquadrate aspect to his north node. What does this mean? Well, there's a strong desire and a strong pull, and almost a karmic pull, and part of his purpose to go for power and recognition, even if it upsets the status quo. Uranus here, power and recognition and upsetting the status quo. The willingness to crush the opposition on the way up, along the way. He's on record as saying he wanted Oasis to be bigger than the Beatles. Wasn't afraid of saying so publicly. Remember that Sesquiquadrate can be associated with obnoxiousness, and it might have sounded obnoxious at the time, and even 2 years ago when I first did this presentation. But now, maybe given how much we now realise Oasis meant to people, we now think maybe they are as big as the Beatles. Maybe he did achieve that ambition. So that Sesquiquadrate is linked to Mercury in Gemini by square. So you can see that square Mercury in this chart, although it's not accurate to be for Mercury to be in the 10th house, but it shows in the 10th house here. We've got Mercury squaring that Uranus-Pluto conjunction there. So remember what we said, what we said at the beginning, that Sue Tompkins says when there's a Sesquiquadrate that has a square or an opposition plugged into it, becomes more intense, it becomes more important. And of course, Mercury in Gemini, again, siblings, sibling rivalry, that comes back into the picture as well. That these dynamics in his chart have a very clear focus, a very narrow focus, again, on his brother. So we can see both of them have charts that speak to siblings, working together with siblings, close relationship with siblings, power dynamics between siblings, as well as sibling rivalry that comes with it. The square from Mercury, as I said, suggests why, why his brother was the focus of the energy of his Sesquiquadrate. There's also something karmic here, as I've already mentioned, because of the North Node's connection, the North Node Sesquiquadrate. The North Node also suggests that Noel is a bit more grown-up here. He's here to learn. He's here to uncover this stuff. He's here to work with this stuff. He's here to learn. It's part of his life purpose. Now we've had a look at their chart individually. We're going to look at some of the synastry between them. Okay, so here we go. This looks like a complicated chart, but I'm going to just talk you through it. So we've got Liam in the middle. We've used Liam's in the middle because we have a birth time for him, so it's easier. Noel is in the center, I should say. Liam's chart is in the center. Noel's is the middle chart, and then on the outside chart is the transits for a gig that they did in 1994, 24th of September 1994. I set it for 10 o'clock at night, which is round about the right time, at the Los Angeles venue Whiskey A Go Go. So, bit of background. So 1994 was when their debut album, Definitely Maybe, was released and quickly vaulted to the top of the charts in the UK. And then they tried to conquer America, but things didn't go as planned. During a gig at the Whiskey A Go Go venue, the famous venue in Los Angeles, the band, allegedly high on drugs, crystal meth apparently, so it said, muddled through a legendary terrible slot, culminating in Liam hitting Noel with his tambourine and walking off stage before the show was completed. Noel, because he'd been hit and because probably the tensions that were brewing all along that kind of exploded on stage in the public arena, quit the tour the next day, although he did eventually rejoin the group after he had a cooling off period in Las Vegas. So we see here, we're looking at the synastry here, we see here Liam's moon in Pisces is in a Sesquiquadrate with Noel's Venus in Cancer. And this is an exact sesquiquadrate, 0, 0, 0. It's exact, very tight. So this sesquiquadrate in their synastry highlights the hurt feelings and misunderstandings, especially Liam's sensitivity with his moon Pisces square Neptune rising. Add to that Noel's Venus in Cancer, which is widely conjunct Jupiter, sextile Uranus and trine Neptune, and square Liam's Uranus. It all points to this sensitivity between them, this sort of eruption from the sensitivity. At the time of the gig, you look at the outside chart now, we can see Saturn there in the 3rd house, transiting on the chart on the outside. At the time of the gig, transiting Saturn was conjunct Liam's moon. There we go. So Saturn is at 7 Pisces, and it's right on Liam's sensitive moon in Pisces at 6 degrees. Very tight transit he was having there. Okay. So triggering this Saturn there, remember the older brother Saturn, we've already established from Noel's chart that that Saturn in Noel's chart actually has something to say about his relationship with the brother, being the older brother and the more responsible brother and the more, you know, the more leader of the band. So it triggers Liam's moon sesquiquadrate Venus. So it's a trigger, that Saturn there is a trigger point for this blow up, this tension. So this gig coincided also with transiting Uranus conjunct Liam's North Node. Transiting Uranus with conjunct Liam's North Node, and Uranus can be explosive in itself. And that transiting Uranus was opposite Liam's South Node and also Noel's Venus in Cancer. So in the synastry, Liam's North Node is sesquiquadrate Noel's Sun. You can see there. It's a very tight order for these sesquiquadrate. So there's a North Node. Liam's North Node is in a sesquiquadrate aspect with Noel's Sun. So there's some difficulty there with Liam expressing his purpose, expressing his karma, with some tension with the ego and the purpose of Noel as represented by Noel's Sun in Gemini. It's a very karmic connection, again, suggesting that part of their life purpose was to have joint goals, to learn to work together, and to tolerate and respect each other. This is what Bill Turney said about how to work with the sesquiquadrate aspect. It's triggered this North Node Sun sesquiquadrate in the synastry between Liam and Noel. The time of this gig, when that blow up happened, it was triggered by the Mars in Cancer, manifesting in an emotional Mars in Cancer outburst. That's the first kind of very public fallout between the brothers here. We do hope that they do manage to get through this tour without falling out, and they're mature men now. They're older men, middle-aged men with families, and we like to think that they have gone past a lot of this. It's interesting to look at this. So the next one is in the year 2000, when Noel pulled out of a world tour. And let's hope that doesn't happen with this world tour. I'm sure it won't. So the background is that in September 2000, Noel abruptly quit the band again, like he did in the 90s, 94, during a world tour, after he'd said that the brothers had got into a really bad fight. Later, Noel would tell British music magazine Q that he said he's never forgiven him, and because he's never apologized. So there's that beef between them. They have a blow up, but it doesn't settle things. It doesn't go, oh, we're really sorry, we're going to just forget about this and go on. You know, that kind of tolerance thing, that making an apology, making amends. According to Noel, that didn't happen. Noel was also said to be frustrated with his younger brother's rock and roll lifestyle. Earlier that year, he'd said, "I'm not mad for it anymore." That was their phrase, "mad for it." I'm mad for it. I mean, this is great. I'm really into this. This is fabulous. I want to do this. I'm not mad for it. I.e., he wasn't enjoying it anymore. On the other hand, he said Liam is mad for it. And unlike Liam, who is said to apparently have fallen off the wagon in terms of his rock and roll lifestyle a few times, Noel renounced drugs and went for more cleaner living. Noel eventually did rejoin the band, but it seemed, for then at least, that the damage was done. So let's have a look at some of the aspects. Let's look at what was going on at the time. So in the Synastry, Liam's Venus there in the chart at the centre there in Leo is in a Sesquiquadrate with Noel's Chiron, the sensitive and intensely sensitive, wounded Chiron in Pisces, 29 degrees, very intense. So you can see the Sesquiquadrate that brings out the sensitivity and the things that might be wounded in the psyche of Noel from that egoistic Venus in Leo in Liam's chart. So we can say that also that Chiron in Noel's chart, we don't know what house it's in, but it does fall on the IC in the fourth house, home and childhood and family and roots in Liam's chart. So again, that speaks to wounds from childhood, that this tension between them, this rivalry, whatever it is, was been going on since they were kids. It's rooted in what happened in the family home, we would say, as astrologers. We don't know for sure, but we would say that that was where it came from. So as I said, their relationship is influenced by, the suggestion is anyway, childhood trauma and wounds which come to the surface. Remember, Sesquiquadrates, as we said, represent some conscious processes that manifest narrowly, i.e. in the intensity of the sibling relationship between the two brothers. That Venus, Liam's Venus in Sesquiquadrate with Noel's Neptune, which falls on Liam's IC, the root of his chart, the family, the root of his chart, is a painful configuration for both of them. Perhaps Noel blames Liam for all his problems. In fact, Noel said they'd been at each other's throats. Mercury, remember, Mercury and mercurial signs like Virgo and Gemini are very, very prominent in both of their charts. Been at each other's throats since Liam was born. And Liam's well known for being very cocky. Venus in Leo shows that. There's a sense of hiding that sensitivity we saw in his chart, that prominent Neptune on the ascendant there, square that very sensitive moon in Pisces. So you've got that kind of swagger and that overconfidence. Remember that Jupiter there in Sagittarius right at the end, that swagger and overconfidence is hiding that deep sensitivity. So natally, Liam, as we said, has Venus in Leo, Sesquiquadrate Jupiter, and Jupiter sextile Uranus and square Sun, Mercury, Mars, Pluto, as we've already talked about, which suggests that excess, that's overindulgence and his famous swagger, and certainly the sort of arrogant attitude that he put across. So at the time that Noel pulled out of the world tour, quit, transiting Saturn was exactly square Liam's Venus, his natal Venus, triggering that Venus-Chiron Synastry Sesquiquadrate that we just talked about. Venus-Chiron Sesquiquadrate between the two brothers. So tensions and rude awakenings within relationships, conflict and potential breakups is suggested here. Loneliness too, as well. The tour came off the back of a critically planned album as well. They'd been doing so well. So creativity also was at a low point here. So we've also got potentially a Sesquiquadrate between Liam's Pluto and Noel's Moon. It's a wide one. We don't know because we have to have such tight orbs with Sesquiquadrates. I'm not going to make any assertions about that one. Okay, other than to say actually that transiting Uranus, the transiting Uranus, we can see that in the third house on the most outline chart, the chart on the outside. You see transiting Uranus, which was at 19 degrees of Aquarius, was quincunx, that awkward, another awkward, tense aspect, although less explosive. But it's definitely difficult. It's a bit like when you've got a quincunx coming up, whether it's in your own chart or whether it's by transit, it's a bit like irritation. It's like walking with a stone in your shoe that you can't get rid of, and in the end it gets too much. So transiting Uranus with quincunx, Noles, Uranus, Pluto conjunction. And transiting Pluto, Chiron was square Noles, Uranus, Pluto conjunction. So again, suggesting perhaps a breakup, hurtful emotions, and a turning point. Which is less so for Liam because that Uranus, Pluto, and Chiron transiting and making a sextile and trine aspects to his chart. So this was probably felt more keenly and more deeply. Remember Chiron in the synastry. The Chiron belongs in the synastry Sesquiquadrate. Chiron belongs to Noel. But perhaps Liam felt it less, maybe he didn't feel it because he couldn't, but it was probably difficult for both of them. Now, Noel quits for good, although we know he didn't quit for good, but at the time when I did this presentation a couple of years ago, Noel had quit the band for good and no one knew they were going to get back together. He said, this was in August 2009, 28th of August 2009. He went onto social media, Noel, and said, it's actually on the band's website, and said, it is with some sadness and great relief I quit Oasis tonight. People will write and say what they like, but I simply could not go on working with Liam any longer. So we have here another sesquiquadrate between the two boys. We have Liam's 7th house, public, Saturn in Gemini, siblings, in a sesquiquadrate with the south node, with Noel's south node in Scorpio. This shows karmic bonds between the two, that they both had a lot to learn and work through, but ultimately Noel had to let go Scorpio, which is one of the functions of Scorpio, is knowing when to let go. And also the south node is about what we have to let go of, what we bring in with us, but we have to let go of if we really want to grow into our purpose. So it's a letting go. He's quitting for good. He said he was, at the time, he was quitting for good. To underline this, Liam's natal Saturn, as I say, there it is in the 7th house. Liam's natal Saturn is in a semi-square to Noel's north node. Remember, the nodes come as a pair, don't they? Which is another, it's kind of, the semi-square is kind of similar to a sesquiquadrate in a way. So we get a real sense, because the nodes are involved, Saturn and the nodes are involved, we get a real sense of kind of destiny here. But we can't discount what they achieve with their music. At the time, Liam was having Saturn square Saturn, so it's a time for him, it was a time for him, 2009, for maturity and responsibility. Perhaps a need to learn that calmness, patience, and objectivity, and a greater recognition of the needs and feelings of others that we learned at the beginning is one of the ways to work productively and purposefully with the sesquiquadrate aspects. That Saturn square Saturn, transiting Saturn squaring Liam's natal Saturn, also picks up on Noel's south node, hence the timing of Noel leaving behind the band, and with Noel finally leaving behind the band and Liam. Also transiting Uranus in Pisces was on Liam's IC. You can see there right at the bottom of the chart. Opposing his Virgo stellium and transiting Uranus was also square Noel's Mercury. Now, Noel was the primary songwriter in Oasis, reflecting the major change of direction and some upheaval. As I said, they went on to have some more music, to make more music in separate bands. Liam and other members of Oasis formed BDI, and Noel's band was the High Flying Birds. And now, of course, they are back together. If you like this video, if it gets a lot of views, if people enjoy it, if you've got any questions about the Sesquiquadrate, I know it's a lot looking at charts that have got 3 wheels. It is a lot, but if you really enjoy it, I will have a look and do another video about the astrology now as they go on their world tour. See how they're doing now, see if the Sesquiquadrates are still being triggered. And we might find something that they, might find progression there. So I hope you find this interesting. As I say, please subscribe if you enjoyed this video. You can also check out my website on purposeastrology.com, and you'll find details on my website of my book on life purpose as well, which is available to buy. As always, lots and lots and lots of love for all of you. Thank you very much.